Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Tony Tompkins Show. I don't know how many people will come on board today, given that it's unusual for me to do a live feed on a Friday afternoon. But I do enjoy doing things a little bit differently. So, hence the live feed. Wasn't able to do one yesterday. So, I'm hoping that some people will tune in today. We'll see how we go. I hope so, because the conversation really is about you having a conversation with me about things that you think are important. And one of the things that I want to talk today about is do we think governments could be more transparent? And the reason why I ask that question now is that there's less and less trust in governments as time goes by. And I'll bring up some statistics in relation to that in just a moment. But as we become less trustworthy, is this because we are noticing that our governments are becoming less and less transparent? So we're not able to see. Hi, PWR, good to see you. So does this mean then that we're not able to respect our respectful governments because we're simply finding that we don't believe what they say? We find that a lot of things that they say are said behind closed doors, that stuff comes out through the media because someone has leaked material, whereas it doesn't directly come from government. So are we receiving less? One of the reasons why I wanted to raise this also was that Peter Credlin raised an issue which I posted on earlier today, and it made me start to think a little bit more about how we negotiate things within Parliament and within governments. And she was raising an issue, in fact, about how we view China, and she sees China as the enemy, and therefore we should behave as if they are the enemy. And we don't know how governments respond necessarily to things that happen in relation to China circumnavigating Australia, about approaching and firing missiles in close proximity of aircraft. So the things that Russia do, we obviously find ways to object to as far as our embassies negotiating that and as far as diplomacy is concerned. But are they issues that we should know something about? So, sorry, listening while cooking lunch. Sorry, back soon. No, that's right, PWR. That's all right. A few people are on board, and that's good to see. So the question for you today is to discuss whether or not we are transparent. And also, along with that, whether we are less transparent because governments are fearful that whatever it is that they have to disclose, the public will not agree with. So they're keeping issues from us, which would determine whether or not we would vote for them or support those particular issues. Now, the reality is that every politician is a public servant. They are serving us, no matter on what side of politics they are our servants, and therefore they should be open and transparent about what it is that they're doing, because it is in, hopefully, our best interest. So I'm going to bring up this particular survey from Bond University. Now, this was a survey done to find out exactly how much we do trust politicians or whether we trust them or not. So as Australians go to the polls, this is obviously done earlier this year, the level of trust in politicians and parties they'll be voting for is at a record low. The new data captured from a representative sample of some 7,000 Australians, in fact, collected in March and April, found only 18% had any trust in politicians. More disturbingly, according to the Bond University Assistant Professor of Law, trust in the guardrails and systems of democracy has almost halved since 2008. And I guess one of the questions, I'll come back to this in a moment, but one of the questions that we also need to be asking is, what is our democracy being eroded? Are we experiencing the same sort of things they experience in the United States, where because we're less and less trusting of our politicians, therefore we're not trusting of the democratic system? Now, we also need to be made aware that here in Australia we have one of the best democracies in the world in terms of our election system and our governance in general. But in the United States, it's a mess because they do not understand the need to abide by simple laws, to be able to understand that the courts have a part to play, and that whatever they deem appropriate should be followed through by the rest of them. That doesn't happen in the United States, but it does certainly happen here. In fact, I'll just go on to say, more disturbing, according to Bond University's assistant professor, as I said before, democracy is almost halved since 2008. The figures from the latest wave of the Australian Constitutional Values Survey were collected as part of the 5-year project studying trust. It's no surprise to anyone that people have low trust in politicians. That's not going to shock anyone, I guess. It doesn't shock me. I mean, for years, we've been saying just that very fact. What is arguably more concerning, particularly in the global context, is the lack of public trust in those guardrails and systems designed to keep politicians accountable. And this is the issue that I raised earlier about, do you think that government should be more transparent? Dr. Deem said the survey showed trust in the federal parliament and the federal government at 26% and 27% respectively. Only 33.4% trusted or strongly trusted Australia's whole system of government, with trust in the courts and judicial system at 44% and independent integrity agencies at 45.9%. So whichever way we look at that, I guess what we can say is that basically the systems that we depend on in terms of our judicial system are quite trustworthy. I'd like to know from you as to whether what you believe is trustworthy. Yes, this is live, incidentally, Jenny. What I'd like you to do is to tell me, what systems do you think are untrustworthy? Why is it that only 33.4%? I would have thought that in terms of the judiciary, that more people would have thought that it was a reliable system and it did the best that it could under the legislation that's provided in order for it to make the decisions that it has to make. So what is there about the judiciary that we think is unfair? And I know particularly when people look at the family law court, they would often find that there are big, massive holes you would drive a truck through in relation to that system and their ability or inability to be able to protect women and children against further abuse. I can understand that from both sides of the perspective. So which part of the legislative system do we not like? Is it like the criminal system? Do we appreciate and understand the criminal system and whether the criminal system is doing the job that it should do? And if it isn't doing the job that it should do, is that the court's problem or is that a problem of legislation? It's something I think that we could all start to think about. This is a worrying because appropriate levels of public trust in government are important. It shapes voting behaviours and gives governments the legitimacy they need to make important decisions and deliver positive outcomes. I think this is a really important point. We need to acknowledge that the levels of public trust in government is important, because if we don't trust governments, we're not going to be able to trust them to behave appropriately, to make laws, to provide the opportunities that will at least make sure and to ensure that we're safe. So if we're not going to trust them, then how are we going to present appropriate ideas and solutions to problems if we don't trust them to carry those solutions out? With such a deep distrust of the politicians themselves, trust in the guardrails around democracy, such as the Australian Electoral Commission. Do we trust the Australian Electoral Commission? I do, 100%. Or the National Anti-Corruption Commission, which I do not trust, right? So, because I think they all are also corrupt, and Brereton, who's in charge of that, has a lot to answer to, I guess, mainly because he just doesn't seem to be doing his job. Because I'm going to be more critical, Dr. Dean said, there's a widespread belief from people that they can't trust what politicians say, that they are usually in it for themselves. Now, this is definitely a long-held belief around politicians in general. And I guess we need to ask the question, why is this the case? I ran for politics on a couple of occasions because I believed that it was important for me to be able to put forward our views in relation to child protection. That's why I did it. Now, if anybody ever questioned my views around that in terms of I was doing it for myself, that would be just totally wrong. I was doing it because I believed in the cause and I wanted to implement appropriate policies so that I could be on the inside, making sure that changes were appropriate. That's why I did it. Now, I'm convinced that there are lots of other politicians who do it for exactly the same reason, that they're concerned about a particular issue, sometimes a one-off issue, such as Nick Xenophon about gambling here in South Australia, and about others, particularly some of the Teals people, and and some of the Greens in relation to climate change and so forth. So people go into politics with a view that they can make change. I do know that as they get into politics, they find that often the changes that they want to make aren't possible simply because the number of votes they need in order to implement those changes just are not there, and people are not invested in the sort of things that they're invested in and the things that they've been working to change for years. I understand all of that. But the point of being in politics is to work with those people to get them to change their views so that they can fit with the things that you think are important. That's what politics is about. So I believe then, after saying all of that, that there are a number of politicians that we can trust, and we need to find out who they are. And if you do not trust your local politician, try and work out why you don't trust them. What is it they're doing that would make you think that they're not going to be able to do the things that you would like them to do for you? So, at the back of voters' minds, whether they realise it or not, when they are making voting decisions, they are considering the level of trust in those external institutions being government departments, being the judiciary, and so on. The latest wave of ACVS is part of the Australian Research Council's funded project, and that's mapping and harnessing public mistrust. Participants in this survey were asked if they could name a politician that they trusted. This is a really interesting point. Then asked a series of questions with that person in mind. The same process was repeated with a politician they distrusted. The good news was that 71% of people were able to name a politician they trust. And the main reasons, I thought that was interesting. So I guess what it is important for us to do perhaps is to think about a politician that we trust. It's someone's got an issue about Ukraine. I've got a post up here about Ukraine shortly, so I might talk about that. So just in terms of finishing off this conversation about whether we trust politicians or not, can you think of a politician that you trust? I can think of quite a few, actually. That isn't because I've necessarily met them, but I've seen them operating, heard them speak, and understand that they are doing the best that they can, full of fallacies, full of mistakes maybe, but at least I think there are people that we could trust. And the main reason behind that they were because they believed the politician to be capable, that they acted in the community's interest, and that they listened to the people. The same was true of distrust, lack of transparency, failing to meet people's needs, and failing to act in the community's interest were the key reasons for distrusting politicians. So let me know what you think. I can see a couple of conversations happening here about American politics, and I did have a number of things that I was going to talk about in relation to this. I don't know if there's any further news that Trump has dumped Ukraine, Jenny says. Jenny, is that current news? I've got to confess, folks, apart from preparing this, which took a while, but I've been also watching the cricket. And I'd add they hold less. So there is this other report that I did want to raise about Ukraine now that people have mentioned it. And if there is some reporting in relation to some current news in relation to Ukraine, let me know. I will follow it up and we'll carry through there. So this is the point. Macron reported warning Zelensky, US may betray Ukraine in territory. Now, I don't know whether there's some current reporting about whether or not that has actually happened. If someone let me know, that would be fine. So there's leaked reports calling which European leaders voiced doubts about Washington's approach to peace talks. We know from all sorts of reporting processes that, in fact, Ukraine is being sold down the river by Donald Trump because he just admires Putin. And we know that this is what's happening. Pierre, I've got about the cricket. it's not a bad match at the moment. It's looking pretty competitive. So I'll just come back to this one. Emmanuel Macron has reportedly warned Zelensky that there is a chance that the US will betray Ukraine on territory without clarity on security guarantees. Dr. Spiegel said it had obtained an English summary of Monday's call, featuring what it said were direct quotations from European heads of government in which they expressed fundamental doubts about Washington's approach to the talks. The French president described the current tense phase of the negotiations as harbouring a big danger for Ukraine in battle with the president. According to the summary, General Chancellor Friedrich Merz reportedly added that the Ukrainian sole leader needed to be very, very careful. And I think one of the issues that we certainly need to talk about in relation to the United States, and I'm just wondering whether there's people here that could talk about this as well, and that PWR says, no way is Ukraine, let's go and agree with you, fair enough, is whether or not we can trust the United States. So we've had this conversation already today about whether we can trust politicians generally, that's our own politicians, the people that are answerable to us, our public servants, whether they're trustworthy, but also as a country, can we trust the United States to do the right thing? I think this is imperative. I don't believe for a moment that we can. I think that there's enough evidence now to prove to us that the United States is fickle, that Donald Trump is someone who will change his mind at a whim, depending on the last person in the room and depending on whether or not he can make any money from the deal. That is who he is, and that's the way it's going to be. And we must remember that Donald Trump will even be in power for over 3 more years. And that period of time is going to be like hell on earth because the world order has changed. United States are no longer in control of anything at all. They're completely isolationists, and that they are endeavouring to mine the world for all the things that they can gather. That is about accumulating their own wealth and security without worrying about the rest of the world. There was a time, in fact, when the United States was a paramount leader in terms of soft power. But they've now acquiesced around all of that by getting rid of USAID. They're no longer interested in helping the world face some of the greatest issues that we face, which include, obviously, pandemics and diseases and things that may kill us. They are not interested in that at all. Donald Trump has no sense of empathy or understanding of anybody else apart from himself. And when we talk about leaders and whether we can trust them or not, it is important, I think, for us to understand that people like Donald Trump cannot be trusted. And here in Australia, we've had some people that I guess have come close in terms of their own degree of narcissism, but I don't think we've had anybody that I could identify to who was necessarily a psychopath. I can see people like Morrison, perhaps, as being someone who was pretty close. Rudd, I could even identify as being rather narcissistic and extremely demanding. But no one as abusive. Can you imagine if in Australia someone had referred to someone as piggy or an idiot, or even referred to news as fake news? Can you imagine the response in Australia if that happened? A leader who behaved in that way here in this country would not last 10 minutes. They just wouldn't, because they know. And this comes back to, I think, this issue around trust, believe it or not. They know that that element of trust is so thin that it would destroy whatever remains of the trust that we have in our political system would evaporate if we had those types of people in power saying and doing the same things as they do in the United States. Now, that also makes me start to think a little bit more about, I guess, the importance of Australia on the world stage versus the United States. We have an important part to play because we are at least a stable system. There used to be a time, I can remember years ago, when studying politics, one of the things that was important was who is the most stable. Which country is the most stable in the world? That is, which is the most reliable in terms of its democracy, its leadership, and its governance. And the United States at one point was pretty much up the top there, along with Australia and the UK and some European countries. It's no longer the case. They no longer exist for the United States. It doesn't. It's gone. Those days where we can rely on the United States to help us with regard to anything have gone. And we need to face the fact that in terms of AUKUS, that's the reason why AUKUS is still a goer, is because we're offering billions of dollars free of charge to the United States to make ships and vessels that they probably will not be able to deliver to Australia anyway, because they haven't got enough of their own. So and I'll come back to this topic over and over again, there comes a time when we as a country have to say, we are not relying on you. Now, I don't know how we go about doing that. I've often, frankly, believed that it wouldn't hurt. It wouldn't hurt simply to say to American politicians, bugger off. We don't want to have anything to do with you anymore because we don't trust you. And we don't trust Trump. And, in the years to come, will there be another Trump? Probably. Will the Republican learn from these lessons? Probably not. Though someone will endeavour, there'll be a J.D. Vance or someone who is even worse, believe it or not, than Donald Trump. Because their system cannot be trusted to weed out the psychopaths and the narcissists. At least our system does. Because if someone fails to pass the pub test here in Australia, the party will drop them. That doesn't happen in the United States because you elect your presidents. We don't elect our prime ministers. So back to this previous one about NATO. Thanks for those people that are contributing. The orange grifter will follow the money. He cares for no one but himself. The world has been played by a moron. So true. And we have. And, why is it? I'm always confused as to why is it that we can see that? You and I can see that. Thousands of people can see that. More and more people in the United States now are at least accepting that the man is a clown, and that in many places in the United States, those who did vote for him on 2 occasions, 3 occasions, some of them, will not vote for him again. They will not, because they do understand that the man is the strangest, most bizarre, and at the moment, there's just so many videos of him going to sleep. The man's tired. The man's exhausted. He's 79. I'm 74. I get exhausted. But doing the type of work and responsible for what he does at 79 must apply immense pressure on him. Yet, he has no concept of what it means to work for the people that voted for him. And I find that shameful, that most of the MAGA people that voted for him are people on low incomes who expected him to be able to provide for them a better way of life, a better standard of living, cheaper prices, and so on. And he doesn't give a shit about any of that. It's shameful, but that's who it is, and that's who they voted for. The magazine said other leaders also voiced their concerns, with Finland's Alexander Stubb, who has bonded with Trump over golf, who cares, reportedly warning we must not leave Ukraine and Volodymyr alone with these guys. Even the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte, who in public is very complimentary of Trump, and they all are, and it's friggin' painful, reportedly said he agreed with Stubb that we need to protect Volodymyr. He said also that he's spoken with several participants of the call who confirmed it took place, and 2 of them reportedly said the remarks were accurately reproduced. There are politicians, there are world leaders now who finally are saying that they've had enough of the United States. They don't believe that what Trump is doing will be helpful because he's siding with Russia, and that we need to protect Zelensky in particular. The magazine produced a report in German and separately published an English version, saying it contained original quotes from the summary notes. Last month, Washington presented a 28-point proposal to halt the war in Ukraine, drafted without input from Ukraine. So how does that happen? How do you have a proposal that apparently was written in Russian, Google translated into English, and then presented as a proposal from the United States? It's stupid. It's crazy. But only in the United States could we ever expect this. So, there was this other thing I was going to talk about too. I don't talk about that now. And there's this other thing which I'll just talk about, how we're going for time. Just talk about this briefly as well. Thanks for all those people that have come on board. There have been quite a few. It has been a bit ad hoc, so be it. Russia ready for war if Europe starts it, Putin says. Now that's promising, isn't it? So if Europe starts it, in other words, if Europe resists Putin's attempts to bomb Poland, for example, or fly aircraft over Poland, then that's obviously going to be Russia, Poland, or Europe starting the war. Kremlin aides said Ukraine crisis is no closer to resolution after Witkoff talks, as Russia president accuses European powers of sabotaging peace. Of course he does. Russia and the US did not make progress towards a peace deal for Ukraine during their talks, a senior aide Vladimir Putin has said, hours after the Russian president issued threats that Russia was ready for war with Europe. So what the impression I often have is that this is escalating and just seems to be getting worse. That Putin's efforts to be able to cause further unrest in Europe and to unsettle NATO seems to be taking shape in the most disdainful way you can imagine. So does that mean that, and one can't imagine why Putin would want to have war with countries in Europe, because they would annihilate him. He already has trouble getting the resources and the soldiers to fight in Ukraine, let alone in the rest of the world. So we don't know where he's coming from in relation to any of that. There was this one thing I do want to finish with. Remember, it is a Friday afternoon. This was really this issue which I meant to raise earlier when we talk about Australian politics, with the Jobs for Mates review, which is damning. And this is where it's these sort of things that are highlighted, which makes us realise, or makes us think that perhaps we shouldn't be all that trustworthy of governments. And the government's response is a failure of the highest order. Despite the high-flown rhetoric, the Albanese government has been tortoise-like in reforming the appointments process. It's now clear why, and this is the article. And I'll just read a couple of paragraphs from this. For years, governments of both persuasion have made appointments to senior public positions with absolute disregard for integrity, transparency and accountability. This has been a significant blow to democratic principles. It has resulted in a serious lack of trust in government institutions. The low water mark was perhaps the Morrison government appointment of a horde of political figures and staffers to the Administration Appeals Tribunal in the concluding days of the 46th Parliament. Despite its high-flown rhetoric, the Albanese government has been tortoise-like in responding to pressure to implement serious reform to the appointment process. True, it appointed Lionel Briggs to undertake a comprehensive report back in 2023, but since its completion, the government has sat on the report for more than 2 years and refused to let the media or the public see it. And this is the issue around transparency. And this is the issue why we don't trust our leaders. And remember that the people making these decisions may not necessarily be your local member. They may be members of a minor party. They might be members of the opposition. They might be backbenchers within the current government. But either way, they may not be the people you need to directly speak to around the issues that you're concerned about. But they are a conduit. They are people that may be able to help you in some way or another. So let me know what you think further about this particular issue. I've jumped all over the place. I apologise for that. I'll be back in full swing come Tuesday next week. Remember, this is only a fill-in live feed because I wasn't able to do one yesterday, and I do feel obligated to do one at least twice a week. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Please remember to subscribe, ring the bell for further notifications. Let me know what you think about all of those topics. Continue the discussion with those in the comment section. Take care, everybody.